Times published a piece last night accusing Trump of tax fraud back when Trump's parents died and left their children money. The Times says Trump didn't make all his money himself. His parents made it. And the reason he got so much money was because he didn't pay the taxes he was supposed to pay when his parents left him the money. So let's break this down. Joining me now, CPA and founder of Geltrude & Company, Dan Geltrude. Dan, good to see you.
Good to see you, Liz.
All right, Dan, there are a couple of accusations within this New York Times piece, and I want you to break it down with a little more of a technical perspective here, because I think people are wondering, they hear these terms, a suspect tax move from Trump or dubious tax dealings. Those are kind of the phrases that are being thrown around by the left. The meat of the matter is President Trump's father and mother, Fred and Mary Trump, left their children hundreds of millions of dollars. You would expect that someone receiving a gift like that would have to pay almost 50% of that gift in taxes. The Trump children paid only about 5%. Is that abnormal, and is it a crime?
Well, to start with, let's be clear on something. When you are making an allegation of fraud, what you're saying is that someone intentionally tried to deceive. So it is very possible with creative tax planning, which many wealthy, ultra-wealthy families can do, they can set up various legal means by which to limit the taxes due on the value of their estate. So just because the New York Times is saying, well, it should have been this or it should have been that, and he only paid this, doesn't mean that something was illegal. It could very well be creative tax planning.
Right, which is what we know. I mean, I think that's a normal human nature thing to do. Nobody wants to pay taxes. People try to figure out how to pay the least amount of taxes while still being above the law. Most of us try to figure out how to pay the least amount while still being above the law. Given what the New York Times published, all of these documents, there is some information in there that tax policy wonks can look at and analyze and say, this looks typical or this looks atypical. Given what you've seen, is this creative tax planning, or was this some method of fraud?
Well, the way the New York Times has spun this, they clearly make it look like it was fraud. But again, nobody has the documents. They're confidential. Only the New York Times has it. So we have no way of knowing whether something was done illegally or not. But let's focus on one thing here, Liz. There is nothing wrong when someone makes a mistake on a tax return. That happens. And when there's mistakes made, there's a statute of limitations which runs out, which means the government can't go back in and open up that tax return. And generally speaking, that's 3 to 6 years, somewhere in that time frame. In this particular case, we're talking about that Trump's parents were both dead by the year 2000. So we're going back 18 years. Now, the statute is closed to be able to open up those tax returns unless fraud could be proven. Then that allows those tax returns to be looked at once again to see if something was done intentionally wrong. And that's the key, Liz. It has to be done intentionally. And that is very difficult to prove. So in this whole matter, I know the state of New York is saying they're going to take a look at these allegations and see what happened. The IRS hasn't reacted because the IRS has already audited the Trump estate all the way back in, I believe, 2004. They made an additional assessment of $5 million of tax and has closed it. So that's where we stand right now. We are far, far away from this being settled, that's for sure.
Right, and we, of course, know the agenda of the New York Times. We know that this has been a talking point of the left. They've wanted President Trump's tax returns because they want to prove, something. I don't know. They want to see how much money he has because they think it's a gotcha moment if he has less money than he says he has. That being said, allegations of fraud, regardless of what party you're in, we should listen to them, we should look at them, and then if they don't amount to anything, we should get rid of them and blast the person who made the false allegations for political purposes. I think Sarah Sanders, press secretary, said earlier that the IRS signed off on that. So that's what she was referring to, what you just described, that the IRS made some adjustments and then closed the estate. So the IRS has signed off on this. New York is going to take a look at these. It's funny to me from a political standpoint, too, that the journalists at the New York Times are interested in this, but they're not interested in the Clinton Foundation. They're not interested in the allegations of pay-to-play that were made against Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State. They're not interested in any other type of pretty massive tax fraud and really shady monetary dealings that have to do with the left, the leader of the Democratic Party. They're only interested in this, and even with this allegation, they don't give us enough information to actually judge it for ourselves. They just say, take our word for it. You should believe us because we said so.
Well, Donald Trump is also presumed innocent, and the Trump family, until proven otherwise. And that's the foundation of our legal system, and that obviously extends to tax crimes as well. So all these allegations can be made and hurled at the Trump family, and he's not as rich as he says, and he didn't make that much money. That is really irrelevant. We already know that Donald Trump is rich. He already said many times that he has done everything that he possibly can to legally limit his tax liability. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody wants to limit their tax liability. The key word is that you need to do it legally. I think the Trump family would have had pretty high-powered advisors looking at the estate, and it's not like the president was directing how to handle tax matters. There were seasoned professionals involved here. I doubt very much that there was fraud going on. It's possible, but I really doubt it.
Right. I would need to see proof one way or the other to make a decision here. But the hypocrisy of, at least in the political aspect of this, just once again, right on the Democrats' back. So ridiculous. Dan, thank you for your analysis. I really appreciate you coming on the show. All right, guys, you have 1 minute to